Welcome back. I'm Anant Rangaswamy, and I have Sir Martin Sorrell, CEO of WPP, sitting in his London headquarters. Sir Martin, this is a little disconnected, but it's a statement that you had made which has fascinated me. You have said that brand America has been tarnished by the budget dispute.
Well, I was
What,
asked...
in your opinion, is the impact of this tarnishment?
Well, I think first of all, what one should say about America is this: is you underestimate America at your peril. So worldwide GDP is about 72 trillion. American GDP is about 16.5. China's 8.5. So China is still half the size of the United States, even though it's growing faster, 7.5% versus 1 to 2% this year, maybe 3%, 2.5%, 3% next year. So China, is catching up, but it's still half the size. And then you come with Japan, about 5.5 trillion, I think it is. And then you come to the big 5 European markets: Germany, France, UK, Italy, Spain, all around $2 or $3 trillion. So you must never underestimate America. You must never underestimate the strength of its immigrant population, even though at the moment there is a controversy about immigration policy. I think it will open up, and immigrants to this day play an extremely important role in entrepreneurial society in America, and I think will continue to do so. Natural resources, human resources, education, higher education, extremely strong. So we all, I think all of us, underestimated America in the 1980s, and along came Ronald Reagan, literally riding to the rescue, just like Mrs. Thatcher did in the UK. And the Japanese domination that a lot of people thought would happen didn't happen. So I think if one looks at America, there are two things that I think really strike you at the moment. The first is self-sufficiency in energy and oil, shale gas. And the second is these revolutions that are taking place literally in manufacturing technology. So 3D printing is really going to change the cost and way that manufacturing is done, and will reassert, I think, the manufacturing industries in the mature markets. So the cost advantage that China, India, Indonesia, Vietnam, and other markets have had will likely be eroded by increasing manufacturing sophistication. So I think long term, you have to say that brand America, I think, will gain strength, as will China as well, because I'm very much of the view that it'll be a G2 or American-China dominated world, certainly in the short to medium term, with India hopefully rising fast to make it a G3 world as well. But having said that, mustn't underestimate them. In the short term, what we've seen with the government, the shutdown, the sequester, the US deficit crisis, we've had two of them really, 2011, 2013, although if you jog backwards, there were many more crises of a similar nature in previous regimes, Bush and Clinton and others. But having said that, I don't think this has played well internationally. And then you add the issues that we've had around Syria and the issues that we've had in other areas on privacy and the NSA and Snowden. All this has not added up. And then last but by no means least, the healthcare, the Obamacare issues in terms of implementation of the new bill. I think all this has not created a strong impression, let's put it mildly, around the world. But having said all that, Anant, I wouldn't underestimate America too. I think it remains extremely strong. I think those two factors, energy and manufacturing technology, improvements in that, will position America extremely strongly. So underestimate America at your peril.
And going from America to China, you've made a statement that Chinese retailers...
I'm not aware that I've ever said Chinese retailers. I've said...
Sorry, I'll rephrase that. Chinese will be big in retail.
And I think we were talking, let's be quite clear. I mean, when I look at Alibaba, when I look at Baidu, Tencent, companies like Renren or Sina, but particularly Alibaba, Baidu, and Tencent, they're starting to build financial transactions platforms, for example. So Jack Ma at Alibaba has his Alibaba company, which will probably be floated in the US at about $100 billion valuation, so it'll be the same as sort of a Facebook. Won't be as high as a Google at 350 plus or whatever it is, but it'll be in the 100 billion category. Tencent's already there at 100 billion and Baidu's 50 billion. So these are big companies in their own right. But each of those companies in China is building a financial transactions platform. So alongside Alibaba and Taobao, you have a logistics platform and a financial transactions platform. And I hear that Robin Li at Baidu has got a banking license, I think, already. And he's also building a financial transactions platform. And Tencent have made a public announcement that they're going to do. So they're going to take on the established banks in China in a way that we haven't seen before. And I was asking a government official as to whether, a municipal government official, as to whether these companies would get banking licenses, to which he said yes. And when I said, well, why would you do that given the established banks? And he said, because the established banks provide services to consumers at too high a cost. So the Chinese government, which I have the highest respect for, and if you see the new policies that the 18th plenum have just put in place, following on from the 12th five-year plan, I think this augurs very well for the Chinese economy in terms of leadership, direction, attention to detail. The change in the one-child policy is much appreciated and much welcomed, and I think will be a strong stimulant to growth, along with the other reforms, whether they be in services, whether they be in social security, whether they be in urban and rural land reform, whatever they happen to be. I think shown attention to detail almost unparalleled anywhere else in the world. So I'm very bullish on that. And in that context, I think the big technological changes, and if you said to me, Anant, what's next? I would say Chinese technological advances of this financial transactions nature, or of Xiaomi, the internet delivered handset, 20 million units last year, or this year, 7 million the year before, 4 billion revenues this year, 2 billion last year, a second round of venture capital financing at 10 billion after three years. So that's a third greater than the price paid by Microsoft to Nokia for their handset division. So, and this is all an internet delivered phone, and they've got a TV box as well, a sort of similar to Apple TV, which they've now launched. They've hired Hugo Barra from Android to help them expand internationally. So I think there are going to be some very interesting technological developments coming out of China. Just give you one other little example. I was in Mexico last week, and one of the manufacturers there told me that the highest selling, the market share of smartphones in Latin America, not just Mexico, Latin America, were Alcatel-Lucent phones, or Alcatel phones made by HTC, and Huawei phones. So at the cheaper end of the smartphone market, the Chinese, I thought that was another interesting example of where the Chinese were invading territory that we thought was the realm of others.
And coming to the last question, as I'm running out of time, it's an India-specific question. I don't know if you followed it, but in India, Publicis Group bought Beehive Communications.
Yeah, that's the Law and Kenneth operation, isn't it?
No. Beehive is separate. Talks with Law and Kenneth are still on, but Beehive is done and dusted. They bought it for a valuation of, I think, about 170 crores.
Yeah, well, I've got no idea what that means. I mean, but Publicis have been buying companies in China and India and Brazil at very, very high valuations, just like, as you know, Anant, Dentsu have done. Those valuations don't work. And we've seen that coming out in the results. If you look carefully at the results, for example, of Publicis in China, it reflects acquisitions made in that market which have altered the, if I could put it, the terms of trade, just like Dentsu have done in India and Publicis have done in Brazil, and ultimately just don't work.
So anything in the pipeline that you can speak of in terms of acquisitions in India?
Well, when we make acquisitions, you hear of them. So this week you've seen an acquisition in Chicago and Kalamazoo of Biggs Gilmore, and you saw Placenta in Turkey. The issue for us, for example, in India, where our business is doing very well, despite the pressure on the Indian economy, certainly in front of the elections, Our business grows. It's a $500 million business now in India, with a very considerable market share, as you know. And the key determinant of our growth in India is organic growth. And I'm delighted to say that despite the difficulties that the Indian economy have faced in the last few months, and I'm sure that after the election, the Indian economy will come back again, hopefully with a decisive election result. We'll get strong government and moving the economy forward. And what we'll see, I think, is a continuation of growth. And we're growing 6-7% in India at a time when most of our competitors are struggling. And that's the key determinant. I mean, if you work that one through for a minute, if we grow at 10% in India, that's $50 million. You won't find an acquisition of that size.
Thank you, Sir Martin, for sparing the time. With that, it's a wrap for today. You can catch the show on YouTube and other CNBC TV 18 social media. Thank you for watching.